Hey guys, this is Yoda. This will be my Brewmaster guide for Season 3 of The War Within. We're focusing on Mythic Plus. Brewmaster is getting a nice mini rework going into the season, and there are a few things that it's getting that we'll go over here. So what is new? New Zhao is new. Before, this was basically not really a playable talent, along with Walk with the Ox. They have changed it, so now it is super worth it. Every 2 minutes, and also every weapons of order. So as Shadow Pan, it's like every 120 or something. You are having an extremely strong cooldown active with New Zhao. He's staggering 40% of the damage for you, and every time you use Purifying Brew, he also does a massive stomp, which does a lot of AoE damage. I've seen it be like upwards of 25% or something of someone's damage in a pull, so it is very strong as a cooldown. We're also getting Celestial Infusion as a choice node with Celestial Brew. In my opinion, Celestial Infusion is far superior. Basically, when you take this talent, whenever you push it, instead of Celestial Brew, your Absorb gets eaten like by 30% of the incoming damage instead of 100% of the incoming damage, which means it's going to last you a lot longer. Instead, that damage is going to hit your health bar, which is, healable. So before, like if you Celestial Brewed at full health and you took damage to it, then you couldn't be healed for that amount of time since you'd just be sitting at full health, but your shield was getting eaten. Now, your shield gets eaten a lot slower, and you can be healed during that amount of time, which in my opinion is far superior. It makes the damage intake much smoother. The other thing that we're getting, that basically everyone is getting, is we're getting a tier set. But the Shadow Pan tier set, which we don't have right now because we're still in Mythic 0 gear, we will get up here. The Shadow Pan tier set basically says your Flurry Strikes proc way more often and do way more damage, especially during Weapons of Order. So what that means is you can like pull Flurry Strikes, Flurry spent basically, before, or pull energy spent before Weapons of Order, and then hit Weapons of Order and just hit like 3 flurries in a row, which is very likely to give you a Shadow proc, especially if you game the buff, which we'll talk about later. And then whenever you have the Shadow proc, if you proc a flurry, you do massive AoE damage. I've seen many clips of Brewmasters topping damage in AoE pulls over like DPS, which is kind of crazy in my opinion, very overtuned. And that is basically the main thing that Brew has going for it this season, in my opinion. So, without further ado, this is my default build. There are a few choice nodes here that you can kind of play around with. So, for instance, Breath of Fire. I've seen a lot of people playing No Breath Shadow Pan in Mythic Plus. In my opinion, you can do that, but Breath of Fire is definitely going to be best for higher keys. If you have any chance of death with Blackout combo, this is up to 10% DR on like very difficult pulls. If you're ever worried about actually dying, then 10% DR sounds pretty good, especially when you're comparing it with talents like this one or this one. If you don't want to play Breath of Fire, like you don't want to deal with the keybind, or you don't think you need the DR, you can also just play Tranquil Spirit or New Zhao's Resolve, but I personally prefer Breath of Fire. We are also playing Rushing Jadewind. This talent is going to be superior for damage since it procs Stomp from Walk with the Ox. However, Special Delivery is also more useful in my opinion, so I'm gonna recommend Rushing Jadewind, but you can also play Special Delivery for the slow, and it's not like that much worse in damage. There's also a couple other choice nodes. In my opinion, Light Brewing is definitely also playable. I'm probably gonna mess with it a little bit this season. Anvil and Stave and High Tolerance. I'm suggesting 1-1 here, but you can easily play like 2-0 or 2-0, whatever you want. On the left side, there are a couple useful talents that I don't have by default, such as Detox. Very useful, especially in Arakara, where the poisons can get out of control. And Pressure Points, if you ever need a soothe, this is where you take it. In order to get this, you can drop Tiger Tail Sweep or Ancient Arts, I believe. Maybe there's some other talents you can drop, like Hasty, Provocation, also droppable. Those are the main things I recommend. For stats, my stats are complete doo-doo on live right now, but I would suggest high crit and verse, mainly prioritizing verse. I guess verse crit is how I would say it. And then haste is pretty good for Shadowpan. I would get up to like 10k, maybe. And mastery is not as good. I would say maybe 10k. Also can be useful in dungeons where you dodge a lot, but probably mostly just go for verse and crit. For trinkets, you guys are not going to like this, but the best trinkets, as expected, are going to be from the raid. They are the Brand of Ceaseless Ire from Soul Hunters. This trinket is extremely overtuned. If you're able to keep stacks, it's going to do a massive single target damage while giving you a shield. And also even doing some amount of AoE damage, usually like upwards of 8%. Well, for Shadowpan, it's probably like more like 5% because Shadowpan does so much more damage. But it's a lot of your damage, especially on single target. The other good trinket that we want is going to be from Fractalus. It is the Unyielding Nether Prism. This is very useful for Brewmaster because, especially as Shadowpan, your cooldowns come at like really awkward times and like not necessarily on a timer. And this trinket basically lets you control when you're getting the damage boost or the stat boost, which turns into a damage boost. which is very useful because you can basically just push it whenever you have a shadow proc or whenever you have weapons of order, whatever you want, however you want to play it. If you don't want to raid or you don't raid, unfortunately you're stuck with the dungeon trinkets. So the best ones, in my opinion, are going to be Solia's Secret Technique from Tazavesh. It's kind of an overtuned stat stick if you count the stats that you give your allies. And Pacemaker, which is from Floodgate. Some other trinkets that are worth considering are the Astral Antenna from the raid, which is the most OP stat stick right now. It's just that, like, I don't really think you want a stat stick. You want Brand and Nether Prism. And the other thing worth considering, well, I guess this is also worth considering, this healer trinket is obviously a healer trinket, but sometimes you need to help your group survive, so that's good. And the Cheat Death trinket is actually decent, I would say, on Brew. If you ever think you might die in a dungeon, like if there's a super hard pull or something and you just want an extra chance at it, then obviously you will lose massive damage for playing this. But sometimes that's okay if your tank loses massive damage and never dies. Next, we will talk about your embellishments. The first thing you need to know about embellishments is that they don't matter. The total amount that an embellishment is contributing to your character is like less than 1%, and the difference between them is going to be even less than that. Early in this season, I do recommend crafting a weapon, a two-handed weapon, unless you are mythic raiding, because from the raid, from the very first boss, in fact, there is a mythic polearm, two-handed polearm, which you can use. I wouldn't say it's best because crit mastery, but you can use this early on in the season. If you're not mythic raiding, then probably just craft a two-handed weapon or wait for vault, whatever you want to do. If you craft the weapon, the best embellishment is Symbiosis. If you don't craft the weapon, the best embellishment, in my opinion, is Dusk Thread. You can also play Adrenal Surge class if you like it, but I think Dusk Thread is better, in my opinion. Doesn't really matter, though. All right, so your cooldowns. We do have Weapons of Order, as we mentioned. It says it's a 2-minute cooldown, but we have this talent. In AoE, it's actually 140, and then we have another talent over here. I believe it's somewhere here for sure. Okay, it's this one. Energy spenders deal 20% additional damage every 50 energy spent, reduces the cooldowns of Weapons of Order. So it's actually closer to like 120, less than 130, but between 1 and 130, depending on how much haste and how much energy you're spending. So it's a really short cooldown, and it also summons Newzao every time you use it. As we mentioned, this makes you really strong offensively, since your Keg Smash is making enemies take more damage. With your tier set, it makes your Flurry Strikes go crazy, and it's also summoning Newzao, which is staggering damage for you. Then we have Newzao himself, which obviously staggers damage for you, and makes your Purifying Brew turn into an offensive cooldown. We also have Fortifying Brew. This does get cooldown reduction by all of your cooldown reduction mechanics on brews, so like Keg Smash, Tiger Palm will reduce the cooldown on this. Dampen Harm I usually prioritize last, since it has, like, I think it's the longest cooldown at 2 minutes. Even though Fortifying Brew is technically longer, it gets a lot of cooldown reduction. And if you do play it, there is also Diffuse Magic. I think this is very useful in a couple dungeons, but not for general use. You need to dispel a magic debuff, like in Halls of Atonement. This is really, really good. It does only last for 6 seconds, so unless you're dispelling a magic debuff or like hitting a really strong magical tank buster with it, I would say it's not that good. I prefer the other talent. But it is really useful sometimes. We also have Exploding Keg, so generally going to want to be sending this for damage because it does a lot of damage. But it does also reduce damage you take by 100% for melees for 3 seconds. So if there's like a really scary melee pull, you can also use this to make time for other cooldowns. Next, we'll go over your defensive kit, mainly your brews. So we have Celestial Brew, which is now Celestial Infusion with the talent, and Purifying Brew. If you've never played Brewmaster before, but you've played other tanks, a nice way to think of it, in my opinion, is Celestial Infusion is basically Ignore Pain. Basically functions exactly the same way, except it only absorbs 30% instead of 50%. Another mechanic you need to be aware of is Purified Chi. So whenever you take damage, you can use Purifying Brew, and then that'll give you stacks of Purified Chi. You want to get to 6 stacks before you use Celestial Infusion. You can also just send one on pull under certain circumstances if it's going to be really tough for you to survive. But generally, to get max value out of it, you want to be using it with Purified Chi at 6 stacks because it increases the absorb up to 200%. So it's way more effective when you use it with Purified Chi. The other brew we have is Purifying Brew. So this is really useful for clearing your Stagger. I like to think of it as very similar to Death Strike. So this is Ignore Pain and this is Death Strike, basically. That is mainly because of this talent. We have, I believe it's called Guy Plin's Imperial Brew. Purifying Brew instantly heals you for 20% of purified stagger damage. And it's also clearing stagger, which is a dot on you. So basically, whenever you take damage, like a lot of damage, you want to use Purifying Brew right after to clear that stagger and also heal you for a decent amount. Obviously, you do have a limited amount of these. It has a 19-second cooldown, unless you play like Light Stagger that has a slightly lower cooldown. And that is cooldown reduction by certain things like Keg Smash and Tiger Palm. Also, this does turn into a damage button whenever you have Newzao, Weapons of Order, or even both of them active. So you have to kind of balance like spending all of your purifying brews on damage or saving them to like kill yourself slash purify your stagger. Generally, I would say if you're just starting out, make sure you always have like at least one purifying brew ready. But do also keep in mind you have Black Ox Brew. This is another brew you have that is cooldown reduction by all the other things. And it basically replenishes all of your brews. If you're playing Master of Harmony, it won't give you both Celestial Infusions, but it does give you 2 Purifying Brews and 1 Celestial Infusion to use. And it also fills up your energy, which is very useful in your Weapons of Order burst window, which we'll go over later. So then offensively, the main thing you need to worry about is Blackout combo. So we want a Blackout kick off cooldown no matter what, pretty much all the time. On a 4-second cooldown, so every 4 globals, 1 second, it's going to be Blackout kick, period. So we'll read Blackout combo real quick. Basically, it doubles the damage of your Tiger Palm, which is really good on single target. With Breath of Fire, it increases the damage, which doesn't really matter because Breath of Fire does no damage, but it increases the damage reduction by 5%. So Breath of Fire's base reduction is 5%. If you combo it, then it's 10%. I think that's really useful in certain pulls. If you're having trouble surviving, it is going to be a damage loss since you're not using it on Tiger Palm or Keg Smash. But if you're, if you need the damage reduction, that's where you get it. Keg Smash reduces the remaining cooldown on your brews by 2 seconds, so the baseline is 3 seconds. If you use it with Blackout combo, it becomes 5 seconds. In my opinion, it is better to use this on AoE than using it on Tiger Palm. The main reason is that this gives you more brews, so you can spam more into your Nuzo, and it makes you like safer because you just have more access to purifying brews. Technically, it doesn't give you damage unless you use the purifying brew with Nuzo, but also at the same time, just buffing your Tiger Palm like in a 10 target pull doesn't really seem like it's that useful either. So in my opinion, it's better to use it on Keg Smash in AoE, and Tiger Palm on single target. So there are a couple very niche uses you can use with your other brews. So with Celestial Brew, you start the pull with no stacks of Purified Chi, and also sometimes you just have massive downtime. If you need a Celestial Infusion like right away, you can Blackout combo your first Celestial Infusion of the pull. That is somewhat useful. And for Purifying Brew, it's not that. It's also like a very niche usage in extremely dangerous pulls if you're just getting like completely hammered. But you have a couple Purified Brew stacks available, like either through just having 2 stacks or having Black Ox Brew up. You can pause your stagger for 3 seconds so that your next Purifying Brew is like insanely strong. I would say this is kind of like a niche usage, maybe like one time in a dungeon you would ever do this when it's a really hard pull. But it is there if you want to consider using it like that. Generally though, you are just going to be spamming Blackout combo Tiger Palm in any single target or low target scenario. In big AoE, I do recommend, as I mentioned, Keg Smash with it. But those are that's basically how you use Blackout combo, and that is also going to be the main thing you're focusing on in your rotation. One thing to note is that if you are playing the Blackout combo Tiger Palm mainly, then you have to make sure to use your Keg Smashes like when you don't, like outside of your Blackout combo window. And if you are planning to use Keg Smash mainly, then you need to make sure to use Tiger Palm outside of your Blackout kick window. So that's a little bit complicated when it comes to that, but some practice and you'll probably get used to it. Outside of Blackout combo, you do have a few other things you want to keep up. Obviously, if you're playing Breath of Fire, you do want to keep that up. So after your Keg Smash, you just Breath of Fire or Blackout combo it. We are playing most of the time rushing Jadewind, so you do want to upkeep this buff. You do want to use Celestial Infusion. That is on the global whenever you're actually going to need it. On single target, you do have RSK also. This is a very hard-hitting ability. As you can see, Tiger Palm hits for, like, if you use your combo on it, it's going to be 340k. This one hits for 800k, so you really want to be using RSK off cooldown on single target. We do also have Exploding Keg. This is a pretty decently strong AoE cooldown, so do use this. And Chi Burst when you have the time to. Obviously, prioritize Blackout combo first, and prioritizing upkeeping this and this. But when you have, free globals, which you will probably have because you don't have that much energy, these are going to be the other buttons you want to keep on cooldown. And if you're done with all of your homework, basically, you've upkept Breath of Fire, you have Brushing Jadewind running, these are on cooldown, then you can start considering dumping a lot of energy. But there is another mechanic that I'm now going to explain, which is the most annoying mechanic to play around, but it is also going to be the mechanic that gives you the most amount of damage possible. So, we're now going to talk about playing around Wisdom of the Wall. First thing you need to know is that you need this weak aura. I'll link it in the guide, but it basically tracks what buffs you've already had from Wisdom of the Wall. So the way Wisdom of the Wall works is there's 4 different buffs. Whenever you proc Flurry Strikes, it'll give you one of these buffs. It says every 10 Flurry Strikes, but realistically, you are going to have 10 stacks every single time you proc it. Every time you actually proc Flurry Strike, except some niche scenarios and Weapons of Order, but don't worry about that. You basically can get 4 buffs, so 1, critical strike damage increased by 30%, 2, dodge and crit chance increased, 3, flurry strikes deals additional shadow damage to all uncontrolled enemies within 6 yards. This is the uncapped AoE shadow proc that we're all talking about, that does the majority of your damage. Like if you look at your damage breakdown, like 30% or something of your damage in a dungeon is coming from that proc. And then the mastery one, which is like completely irrelevant. So the way this works is every 4 times you proc flurry strikes, you're going to get 1 of these buffs. And then it cycles through all 4, and then it resets the order. So if you could get like, let's say you get it like in order, right? From top to bottom, you get like crit, then dodge, then shadow, then mastery. Then it resets, and now suddenly you're eligible to get all 4. But like if you just had crit and dodge, now you're only eligible to get shadow and mastery. So generally, I mean, you don't want to be like just stopping spending energy to play around this. But for instance, let's say like you're at the end of a pull, and now you have, I believe it spends at 240, right? So let's say you have 210, and then you're at the end of a pull, and shadow is eligible. Well, you definitely, ideally, would not be spending energy to spend a flurry strike at this point, because then if you proc shadow and the pull is ending, then, you know, and you go into the next pull, then you have to cycle through 3 things before you even have a chance to get your next shadow buff. So basically, you need to play around what type of buffs you can get, and, you know when to hold DPS. On the other hand, if I throw this, and I get a shadow buff, which I didn't, but if this happened to proc shadow, then I would want to be spending energy ASAP, right? I need, because before I get my next shadow buff, I need to get 3 other buffs before I can possibly even think about getting shadow. So you need to play around this Wisdom of the Wall quite a bit. If you don't play around it, I mean, you're still going to do really high damage. But min-maxing this is going to be what ends up giving you the most possible AoE damage. Also, worth thinking about, as soon as you have your tier set, Weapons of Order triggers at 150 energy spent. I thought it was 120. I'm not sure if it was a tooltip bug, but it starts triggering at 150 energy, so you're going to pull a bunch of energy spent and then like trigger a bunch of them in a row. So like getting a shadow proc early in that sequence is really important. I know it's going to be really, really annoying to play around. One other thing is that this deck of cards does not reset when the key starts. It resets when you log out. So before the key starts, what you actually want to do is like hit a target dummy until like only shadow is available, or maybe like shadow M1 if you don't want to be like that cringe before the key starts. So you're sitting there hitting the target dummy. Oh, 215. Next one's gonna proc something. Let's see what it procs. Bang, it procced mastery. Now we have shadow and crit available, so now we're ready to start the key, and then your first 2 Wisdom of Wall procs are going to be shadow and crit, and you're going to completely pop off in the first full of dungeon and take a screenshot. So that is how you play around that. Obviously, throughout the dungeon is going to cycle a bunch, and you don't really want to be holding energy like too much. Like basically you have to stop letting your character do that, and then you're playing the tank, so you might die or lose aggro by doing that. But yeah, do keep that in mind. This is something you definitely want to be playing around. So yeah. Alright, next we'll talk about gathering packs. So Brewmaster's Gather is one of the roughest things in the game. Your only range skill that hits multiple targets is Keg Smash, and it's only 15 yards, and the radius is freaking pathetic. Like, if I Keg Smash this, it barely hits all 5 mobs. Like, if the mob was, like, over here, it wouldn't even hit that mob. What that realistically means is you're going to be running past a bunch of mobs with Tiger's Lust, Keg Smash, like, drive-by, and then, like, just spinning Crane Kick through a bunch of mobs, and then like finally land at your target. Alternatively, you can pull mobs from range with like Chi Burst or Crackling Jade Lightning, but these abilities do not generate basically any aggro, so all the mobs are basically going to be running in untagged, so you better hope like you can actually land a Crane Kick on them before they kill your allies. And then we also have some basic utilities, so there's, Leg Sweep, AoE Stop, Ring of Peace, AoE Stop. Paralysis, you can use this to CC a mob for a long time, or you can just use it to stop a cast, or if you're talented, you can use it to stop enrages. In terms of helping allies survive, you do have Vivify. It is quite strong as Shadowpan, since you have this talent, Protect and Serve, and you also have Vivacious Vivification. Every Rising Sun kick makes it heal for free. Rather, not free, but instant cast. So I wouldn't like be spamming Vivifies or anything in the middle of a dungeon, but let's say you're in Dawnbreaker, and you see like, oh shit, someone has a dot and there's about to be a big AoE, then you can kind of help him survive with Vivify. Detox is mostly useful, I would say, in Arakara. The poisons get really out of control there, so make sure you have Detox there. Next we'll go over a couple really useful tricks. So first one is not really a trick, it's just using the talent Lighter Than Air. So you're going to roll to trigger it, and now you can basically double jump or jump glide. So that's mainly useful for two things. Number one, you can use it to jump over obstacles. And number two, you can use it to counter knocks. For instance, in Dawnbreaker, the same dungeon, right? Let's say the boss is terrifying slamming you. Well, we're going to roll, and then he hits me, and then I just double jump, and then that counters basically the movement from the knock, so I don't need to get knocked into post. I can just do that every time and keep up time. Next, we're going to talk about the Ox statue. So this is basically your statue. You can put it down. I will taunt anything near it. So one trick you can do is you can like drop this and then like, you know, take a teleporter, and then this will aggro mobs and that can potentially snap to you. Don't worry too much about that. As soon as tech is discovered with that, I'm sure it'll be shown on stream or something. Another thing it can do is cheese mechanics. So for instance, in the dungeon prior to the Sacred Flame, there are these war lynxes that jump to anyone that's not in melee, or if everyone's in melee, they'll pick someone that's in melee. So if, let's say these are the lynxes, I could, if everyone in my group was over here and I put the statue here, they can actually pick the statue as a viable target. So they would all jump to the statue. So definitely something that you do want to utilize when possible. And there is also an ability called, or something you can do, which is provoking the statue. I have a macro for that I'll show here. It's also in the doc version. So basically, if you taunt the statue, then it auto taunts everything near it. So I'm going to do that. Then I will push provoke. By the way, it is on global to move it, and it automatically taunts everything near there, which can help a lot with aggro issues. Very useful there. And there's also para Rop skip. Rop's not going to work on these dummies, but you can like para the mob that's closest and then ring a piece it so it doesn't run into the ring, and then you can walk by. Careful, because I think Ring of Peace is bugged right now and it procs a few things, so this skip might not be super reliable. The last thing we haven't talked about, which I probably should have mentioned earlier, is your Stagger. Don't really play too much around it, other than there are some things in your talent tree, like High Tolerance and Training of Nuzao, that benefit you when you're in Red Stagger. But at the same time, if you're Red Stagger, you're usually going to be taking a lot of damage. Usually I would say if your red stagger is like 2 mil or higher, definitely purify that ASAP. But if it's at like 1 mil, it's kind of okay to just sit at 1 mil and benefit from the extra stats. Mainly though, I would say just use don't try too much, I would say, to get extra stats out of it. Just purify, you know, if you're in danger, just use purify. Stagger is not something you really have to play around that much. It's just like something to be aware of. Make sure you're tracking it somewhere. Anyway, that is going to be the Brewmaster guide. As a short disclaimer, this is going to be my first season actually playing Brewmaster for real in a high key season, but I did play it a decent amount on the PTR. Also, I mainly recommended Shadowpan, but Master of Harmony is perfectly viable, especially in Raid. It is going to be better. It does very good single target. It just doesn't have the massive AoE that Shadowpan provides at the moment.